Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to futurist, IT architect, and free software advocate Ariane Campos, who is one of the authors of the Info Security Handbook for Journalists. Ariane, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Great to be here again.
So this is a book that's going to be freely available, correct?
Yes.
And it's a book that's going to allow journalists to work in a way that avoids a lot of these problems of getting spied on. You've brought some interesting things with you. Talk about the book a little bit first, then we'll get into the props.
Yeah, so it's one of a series of handbooks made by the Center for Investigative Journalism. And then they asked me and my co-author, Silke Carlo, to write a book where somebody can, on his own, without external technical experts being present, just work through and set up their laptops and whatever else they use to protect themselves and their sources and their story as they go about their business, given everything we now know of the level of spying that's going on, particularly against journalists.
Okay, let's take a quick look at some of these props here. You have one. This looks like a cufflink.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, it is a cufflink. It does work as a cufflink, actually, but inside is a USB drive, and that contains a system called Tails, which is a Linux-based operating system particularly designed for privacy and against surveillance. And one of the things that we discuss in the book is how to set that up and how to use it. And you can run a complete system off one of those drives and also give those kinds of drives to your sources so that you can then both communicate in a very secure way without it requiring very expensive equipment.
And of course, these days you can pay investigative journalists using cryptocurrency, and that's completely hidden.
Yes, and you could hide it inside the system as well. So put that in there on top of the documents and the photos and all the other material you have.
All right,
so
fantastic.
it becomes very secure.
Let's, you're bringing up something new here, which I think is remarkable. To fight against the NSA and the NSA spying, the idea is to increase the cost of spying, to bankrupt those who are doing the spying. Because right now the cost of spying per person, I think you quoted a number like 8 cents per,
something like
per
that.
day or something like that.
It's ridiculous.
So start off there, and then where are you going with this?
You can roughly calculate what the NSA spends per person per day if you take the amount of people they're spying on, which is something in the order of $2.5 billion, and you take their budget, which is something in $80 to $100 billion per year. So if you do the numbers, you come out at something like 8 to 10 cents per human being per day that they collect all this information on. And it's mostly because most of us give it away automated. So they don't have to spy on us. We type it into Google and Facebook, and we carry around phones that are completely leaked. And so we have automated the process for them. And with some of the tools, again, that are in the handbook, and it's for journalists, but it's really for everybody who wants it, you can increase the cost of that massively by just taking a couple of basic steps that takes you maybe a Saturday afternoon or a weekend to set up. You can increase the cost of having that kind of information about you that for most people the NSA now gets for essentially almost free. You can require them to actually start physically following you again, like in the 1980s. And so if enough people do that, then it simply won't be possible within any budgetary space for the NSA to do the amount. I mean, they can maybe still then spy on 10,000 people, but not on 2.5 billion.
Right.
So then it's not a solution, but we've gained a lot.
Right, so the idea of going after them on a legal basis, that doesn't seem to be working because there's no will on any government to go after them on a legal basis. And so this is a way just to increase their costs and to bankrupt them, put them out of business. They just don't have,
just make it too expensive for the kind of stuff to do. And it's also, we don't have to wait for governments to act. Each individual can literally start today.
And China's already doing something like this?
China is now very structurally phasing out American technologies in key parts of their infrastructure, particularly in their own banking sector, interestingly enough, and their government sector. So they're phasing out US-made servers, US software, things like that. And this is going on in many countries, like many Latin American countries are now doing the same and have been for some time. But over the last year, this has gained an extra push. And there were some little beginnings in Europe, like the German government saying to Verizon, sorry, you will no longer be providing the German government with telephony services because we don't trust you anymore. So there's some stuff going on, but yeah, it really should be a lot more, given that, when we buy this stuff, we are buying spy infrastructure. So we are paying for their hardware to spy on us. It's ridiculous, really. Yeah,
and Russia is an interesting case because Russia is an economy that is, I would describe it as being trapped by the hydrocarbon business, the oil and gas business. When it's high, they fall back and say, we're making too much money on oil, we're not going to bother diversifying. When it's low, price of oil, they'll say, oh my God, we need to pump more oil because we're running out of cash.
Yeah.
So they're trapped in the oil cycle. But now with this development with the NSA spying, it's almost as if now they're being forced to diversify their economy, which is a long-term huge positive for them, correct? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so one of the news items of last week was that the Russian government will now be producing, for the 1 million computers that they buy per year, they will be producing their own processors in the near future, and they're tooling up a factory for that, and they no longer want to buy American-made processors because, again, there's so many questions about the spying that they say we just can't trust this. And once you build that particular very complex component, then all the other things sort of follow along from there. And of course, once you start making for the government, why not just for Russian businesses and the rest? So yeah, take a little bit of all that oil money. I mean, it's sloshing around the money there. They have a lot, unlike most of us now, and invest it into some of these factories and industrial capability. And I mean, we all know they have the engineering knowledge and they have the educational system to keep that going. So they could be really big if they just sort of take a little bit of the money and invest it in those kinds of things, which they're now doing.
To get around the spying, they're going to get into the chip business.
Yeah,
and once you get into the chip business, you're in the tech business.
Yes.
And now you're cutting into IBM, Oracle,
everybody, Intel, AMD,
Intel.
yeah, all the hardware manufacturers. I mean, also a lot of the stuff is, of course, comes out of China.
But IBM's already taken a massive hit.
They couldn't sell their server business to China. They said, sorry, we don't want it. So they were going to sell off.
The same thing with Oracle. Oracle, same story. Now, so in other words, to spy on everybody, to avoid a few attacks here and there, they're going to
zero so far.
Zero attacks. They're going to blow $1 trillion in revenue for these high-tech companies and essentially gut the American economy.
If everybody starts doing what Russia and Germany and China are now starting to do, if the world starts to do that, then yeah, that's going to be several $100 billion a year.
So the Germany and Verizon deal, what are the costs? Or what are the numbers actually?
I'm not sure what the exact value of the contract was, but I think we're talking about tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, something like that. So it's not the German national telecoms infrastructure, it's telecom services to the German government. Mm-hmm. So it's like the internal telephony network between ministries and other government institutions.
Let's talk about TTIP. TTIP is this new global trade deal that overrides all sovereignty. And the forces the hand of the likes of Germany, presumably were TTIP in place, Verizon could sue Germany and the corporate arbitration panel would rule against Germany.
Yeah.
So this is the big story about TTIP. If, in fact, Germany were to do what you've just said that they are doing, or Russia or China, they could go to this global TTIP trade organization, like the World Trade Organization is a global institution, or the World Bank, or the IMF. The TTIP services this global world order, and they can complain. And not only do they get money back for the perception of having lost the businesses, but they get paid damages.
It's great. It's just big corporations can just open up a tap of money into foreign sovereign governments. It's really crazy. It would really surprise me if the rest of the world, because it seems to be mostly beneficial to a handful of Western companies, I think the rest of the world would be crazy to accept it. I'm sure they will be lobbied and pushed and cajoled, and there'll be all kinds of nasty stuff going on behind the scenes. But now, on top of all this spying, which of course many governments were already somewhat aware of, but now they have to also admit it to the citizens. This is what is being done by them to our country. So I think it will become politically very painful for governments to do this.
Yeah, so it's just too
like
expensive.
ACTA, it might be defeated.
It's just too what?
Yeah. Also, like ACTA and SOPA, it might be defeated. So it might go a long way even into the EU Parliament, like it already has. But then, sort of once you get near the date that actually it has to vote upon, suddenly you'll see out of Europe or out of other countries sort of a growing swell of resistance. And so SOPA in America was one of these laws that was defeated that way. At the 11th hour, by just tens and hundreds of thousands of people literally calling Washington and melting the phone lines and just saying, don't vote for this. And we had the same thing in Europe with ACTA, where we defeated it at the last minute in the EU Parliament because there was so much resistance to it. So it always takes a while for that resistance to sort of come into its own. But then I think TTIP is going to go the way of ACTA and the other ones, although probably the fight will be even harder and there'll be lots of lobbying. But it's...
let's talk about Proton Mail, which was basically a hack-proof encryption email system that came out of one of the universities. It just returned, you know, they were crowdfunding this Proton Mail program. They got $280,000 through PayPal. And apparently PayPal asked the Swiss company if they had permission from the government, presumably the United States, to offer this service. So the U.S. is bullying the Switzerland about this independent corporation trying to come up with NSA-proof email. Where do you think that case is going?
Well, if the U.S. pushes hard enough, they might actually make it life difficult. But the Swiss are very resistant to this kind of stuff. When in 2010, when the U.S. ordered all the WikiLeaks domain to be taken down, so the WikiLeaks.fr in France was taken down, and WikiLeaks.org was taken down, and the Amazon stuff was. The one domain that wasn't taken down was WikiLeaks.ch, the Swiss domain. This is just run by a little foundation out of the University of Bern, and they got the call as well. And they just said, sorry, your laws don't apply here. This is Switzerland. Goodbye. Now, I don't know if there's still that sort of ballsy today, but I think Switzerland and Germany would probably be two of the countries where you have a good legal framework to do these kinds of services that are resistant to sort of foreign, legal and political tampering. But yeah, it's not going to be easy to do these kinds of services. I actually think that decentralizing it even further down to the individual user will be in the future the way to go. So all of us just having a couple of these lying around with your email on it and with your documents on it, with the stuff that's really important for some reason. And so completely decentralize it down to the individual.
What do you make of this accusation by Vladimir Putin, who came out and said that this fine that the U.S. is charging on BNP, close to $9 billion, is all about extortion, essentially. They want they want France, and they want the U.S. wants France and these other European countries to fall in line and accept these trade deals like TTIP, or we're going to extort you for, in this case, 9 billion euros. I mean, you're a European. Here's your fellow European bank down over there in France being extorted by the U.S. for a huge amount of money. This is outrageous.
No, it's interesting that now suddenly the U.S. government seems to be in the business of fining banks. I mean, would it that they had done that back in 2008? That would have been good, but now...
Yeah, it seemed all European banks. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Oh, no, they're all doing great. All right. Aaron, we got to go, but we'll have you on again soon. Thanks again for being on the Keiser Report.
Great to be here again.
That's it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Aaron Campos. If you can download his book, The Info Security Handbook for Journalists, it's free online, and you should do it. If you'd like to get in touch with us, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.